In the humid fields of Louisiana, in the year 1856, there stood a small wooden chapel surrounded by endless stretches of sugarcane. The man who led the prayers there was Reverend Silas Ward, a preacher with words smooth as honey and eyes that glimmered with false holiness. He was loved by the white planters, feared by the enslaved, and known in every corner of the parish as a man of God. Yet behind the thin veil of sermons and sanctity lay darkness so heavy that even the night seemed ashamed to fall upon his house. The Reverend owned no plantation of his own, but he often visited those who did, claiming to bring spiritual comfort to the enslaved. He would walk among the slave quarters with his Bible pressed against his chest, reciting verses about obedience and sin, but his heart was corrupted. His visits were never for salvation, but for power. Under the cover of religion, he preyed upon the women who could not say no. Their tears were hidden behind the sound of the river, their cries silenced by the fear of the whip. Among those women was a young one named Clara. She belonged to the nearby Blackthorn estate, known for its cruel overseer and endless labor. Clara was quiet, her hands scarred from cutting cane, her spirit unbroken despite her chains. When Reverend Ward first saw her, she was singing a low hymn in the fields, her voice trembling like the last note of a dying prayer. He told her she was blessed, that her voice could reach heaven, but heaven was far away in those days, and the Reverend's intentions were not divine. Weeks passed, and Clara's life became a shadow. The Reverend would call her to the chapel under the excuse of teaching her the Word of God. What happened inside those walls was known to none, but the whispers grew. The other women began to notice her fading smile, the fear in her eyes, and the way she avoided the church bell's sound. Her sorrow became their silence, for no one dared to speak against a white preacher. But the land itself does not stay silent forever. One night, as a storm rolled over the cane fields, the Reverend's secret began to turn against him. Clara fell ill, her body weak, her spirit broken. Yet before death reached her, she gave birth to a child, a boy with skin lighter than hers, but eyes that mirrored the Reverend's deceit. The women hid the child, fearing he would be taken, and buried Clara at dawn under the shade of an old willow tree. The Reverend never asked about her again, though his face grew pale when the wind rustled the leaves near the chapel. Months later, strange things began to happen. The chapel bell would ring at night, though no one pulled the rope. Candles lit themselves when the Reverend preached, their flames trembling as if in fear. He began to dream of the fields and of Clara standing in the rain, her hymn turning into a cry. His sermons grew shorter, his voice weaker. Those who attended said he had lost his light, though none knew it was guilt burning him from within. Then came the night when the truth refused to hide. It was midsummer, and the Reverend stayed alone in the chapel to write his sermon. The storm returned, as if the heavens themselves remembered Clara's pain. Lightning flashed through the windows, and in its brief light he saw the reflection of a woman behind him. When he turned, no one was there. He dropped to his knees, trembling, the Bible falling open before him. But instead of holy words, he saw the page torn, stained with something dark that looked like blood. The next morning, the villagers found the chapel door open, the floor soaked with rain, and the Reverend lying cold before the altar. His eyes were wide, fixed toward the ceiling, his hand clutching the Bible to his chest. The doctor declared it a heart failure, but the enslaved knew better. They said the Reverend had been judged by a power greater than the laws of men. They said Clara had come for him, her spirit walking with the storm to collect the debt owed in tears. After his burial, the chapel was left to rot. No one dared to enter. The bell never rang again, and the sugarcane around it grew wild, as if the land wanted to cover what had happened there. Yet some nights, when the wind swept across the fields, those who passed by claimed they heard a faint hymn, sung by a woman's voice, followed by the low, broken sound of a man weeping. Years later, when slavery ended and the Blackthorn plantation was abandoned, the story of Reverend Ward became a whisper passed from one generation to another. Mothers told their daughters never to trust men who spoke too sweetly of heaven, and old men said justice might come slow, but it always arrives, even if it rides on the storm. And so the legend lived on. The chapel eventually crumbled, but the willow tree remained, its roots deep in the soil where Clara had been buried. Beneath it, flowers bloomed every spring, though no one ever planted them. People said it was her forgiveness growing quietly, refusing to die like her memory. And those who still dared to walk past the ruins swore that the air grew heavy there, as if carrying both the weight of sin and the peace of redemption. Thus ended the story of the Reverend who used God's name to prey upon the innocent, only to find that no sermon, no robe, and no title could save him from the judgment written by his own hands. The earth remembered, the wind remembered, and the woman he wronged found her justice, not in this world, but in the one where no chains could ever bind her again.